Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our weekly podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. This is a free service from Property Ventures so that you can keep current and learn from some of the best around New Zealand. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hi and welcome to this week's podcast. We've had a few requests from investors to have someone talk about apartments. We're about to have another agent come on board with Property Ventures, and it's about time we provided you with apartments. On that point, if you are looking right now for apartments, let us know what you're after and we'll endeavour to get you what you require while you're either at work or maybe even having a sleep. Hey, we're always here to please. Anyway, I found someone very knowledgeable in the field who I met last week. His passion and enthusiasm in the Auckland apartment field grabbed my attention, and I knew he was the right man to enlighten you. His name is Andrew Murray and has his own real estate company called Central Auckland Apartment Specialists. I'm sure you'll enjoy part one of this two-part interview. Hi Andrew, and welcome to the show.
Hey mate, how are you?
Yeah, very well. So many of our listeners invest in or would like to invest in apartments, mainly in Auckland. Some have requested that we do a podcast on Auckland Apartments, so here we are today. But before we go too deep into that, let's tell us a bit about who you are and what your background is.
Okay, so my name's Andrew Murray. I started the Apartment Specialists probably about just over a year ago, and that's a real estate agency that just sells apartments, only apartments and no houses. My background's an interesting one. I actually went through school, did the degree, realised that going and working for a large company was not my thing. My background, interestingly, was marketing, which has obviously helped in real estate, and then a mortgage broker, which helped again. And then the big one was actually the stock exchange. So I was in there selling derivatives, and that's really gave me a good appreciation on how to look at apartments because there's so many of them. It's really brought an interest to me because each building to me is like a different stock. And so, then from there, I went into, obviously having a selling background, doing seminars all around New Zealand, came into apartments, and I suppose in a nutshell, that's sort of brief on it.
Great stuff. Yes, interesting enough. Like many entrepreneurs we have on the show, you're not liking to quickly establishing the fact you don't want to work for anyone else and work for yourself and build up your own empire. Interesting.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a history. I started out with city sales, which everybody knows about, and then to Ray White, and that's when I realised things could be done a lot better. Yep. And it was interesting because quickly, obviously selling up to some months with a team within Ray White, sort of 20 to 30 apartments a month. So it's a big turnover industry, this one. So it's cool.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. So out of all the areas you could be selling in real estate around Auckland, why apartments? Why specifically that?
Okay, so I touched on it just before, just briefly, it was turnover. First of all, I looked at it and looked at suburbs in Auckland. So I didn't just stumble upon apartments. It was more a choice because of the economy. If you look at the economy, when a lot of the apartments in Auckland are investor apartments. So when in bad times, people sell their investments. And in good times, people purchase investments. So it was more coming in from that sort of area where if you look at listings or how much stock is on the market, the Auckland CBD market is the largest in New Zealand. So it's purely that there's a huge amount of business happening and always activity, especially through those times of 2008, 2009, 2010, around that period.
Yeah, that makes total sense. If you can get a business where you're keeping busy in all aspects or all markets, up and down, sideways, that's essential. The apartments are such a diverse market, and way more than listeners probably realise unless they've been right into it themselves. So what sort of things do you need to do to keep on top of the market as a buyer, and probably especially you even more so as an agent, an expert on it?
Okay, so you've got two questions there, one from a buyer's point of view and one from an agent's point of view. An agent's point of view, I'd go first because obviously that's what I deal with every day. It's knowing your market. It's the great thing about the apartment market. Once after coming into it, I realised it's completely predictable because it's all about numbers. Your investment stock's about your return, especially a smaller stock, and that determines value on what the market will accept. The second one is the cost to build. We're in a unique situation at the moment where all this, what I call a secondary stock, which is stuff that has been pre-built, i.e. not off the plans, not new, is still selling below replacement cost.
Right.
So it gives you a really clear indication where the values are heading, and when the values will hit in the secondary market, the values that are being sold off the plans, it tells us more is going to come in the market. So it's all about demand and supply. So as an agent, what I'm doing to be obviously an expert, and it's about me knowing more than anybody else, is being in close contact with the developers, looking at how they do their feasibility studies, so I can actually predict where this market's heading, which enables me to have an advantage over everybody else and give sound advice to people I'm dealing with. Now, the second question in regards to buyers, it's figuring out what's your demographic. Now, what I mean by demographic is what's your sole purpose. Now, if you look at it, a good way to look at it is to say, look at my parents, look at my sister, and look at myself. So if I look at my parents, they're in their 60s, they had quite a few houses, they'd enjoyed a lot of capital gain, and their main concern as they got older was income. They didn't really want to leave money for me in the bank when they pass, as much as they'd like them to. So what I did is I said, look, sell your houses, go into apartments, and basically they almost tripled their income. And, they're lucky they've had capital gain with it as well, but their sole purpose was income, and so they're dealing with their smaller stock. That was their purpose, that was their objective, is to increase their income stream and basically be professional holiday goers, which is what they call them at the moment. Yeah, then you look at my sister, so she's sort of mid-30s, got a reasonable income, got a family on the way, they've got a house at the moment, and they need capital gain. When they have that second kid, they need to move to a fourth bedroom. And in Auckland, the housing prices are so expensive. So her main concern is having the mortgage covered, not essentially having it being, as long as it's covered, maybe topping it up a little bit or having a little bit or making a little bit of money there. That's not really the main objective. It's capital gain. So then so what that means is you're looking at a completely different type of stock.
Right.
And then the third one is if you're a high risk profile. So that means you're coming in, you're a cash buyer, and take advantage of what most people don't look at, and you become a little bit more in debt. So that's when you take advantage of situations where a building has not got its code of compliance, but it's coming. So you do some research, you can purchase it because as soon as it is back on the market, essentially, it's always on the market, but as soon as it's available to the masses, the prices are going to go through the roof. But it means you need cash and you need to be able to purchase without using the bank as much.
Yep.
So yeah, does that sort of make a bit of sense?
Yeah, so going by that, the first thing they have to do is know what they're trying to achieve is obviously really clear. And as you said, everyone's in a different situation, so that's, yeah. So we're sort of going, I suppose, further to that then with, what do they need to keep on top of the market as a buyer? So I suppose establish what they're after and then get into that look at apartments in that particular market, whatever that is. Yeah,
it's looking at, what's their objective first, rather than looking at apartments. Get their advice, go and talk to their accountants. What's their long-term plan? Is it a couple of years? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? What is that? And then aligning that plan with the right kind of stock. I love it. That's why I like apartments, because it's so much more academic and there's so many more options, because there's about 10 different categories of apartments within this actual market. And so you can tell the enthusiasm probably coming out of my voice because I love what I do. But every solution is different, and there are so many opportunities in this market, which is great.
Yeah, and that's what happens. I get some people coming to me, and to be fair, we haven't started with apartments yet. We're just about to. It's one of the reasons you're on the show, as well as people asking to hear someone like you. But yeah, there's people don't appreciate. They say, "I want an apartment." And, what do you want? There's 30 square metre apartments. There's 60 square metre apartments. There's 150 square metre apartments, and it's way more diverse. Especially at leasehold, fee simple, and all those bits we'll talk about soon. Of different types you're after, and you must get that. I suppose you get that quite often. People just come in asking for an apartment, and you're not sure where to start with them. Well, you'll know what to do with them, but
we're in apartments. I see it differently. We're selling a solution on apartment because the apartment will fulfil the solution.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right. It's first delving down. What are you guys trying to achieve here? I completely skipped one area of the market, which is because I wouldn't imagine you're dealing with them as much, because you're dealing with people wanting to make money just from the nature of what you do and then how you do it. But obviously the one I did leave out was owner occupiers and people who want them for personal reasons, and that's the other kind of market in itself. And I'd imagine from investors where they're wanting to make capital gain, they're looking for apartments that's able to be sold to owner occupiers in the future. So I've just sort of turned in a circle there because I missed an important part of the market out, but that's just probably because I didn't really see it as being to your audience. Would that be correct?
Yeah, no, that'd be fair comment. The only probably people potentially would are people from out of town, like myself, who kids are about to go to university and they are sort of buying it as a semi capital gains apartment, I guess, as well as putting their son or daughter into the place. So that's similar to that market, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Just moving on then from starting establishing what some of the differences are. Lending on apartments. I know it comes down to sizes. I was listening to a mortgage broker about 6 weeks ago about this. So enlighten us sort of how that all works, because it's crucial for the whole deal, obviously.
Oh, extremely crucial. It's a huge game stopper in a lot of ways, but also an opportunity. Because if you look at it, you've got the major banks, and some of them will lend it. Certain criteria changes the value you can get for an apartment. So if it's below 40 square metres, it means none of the major banks will lend up to 80%. So that means you need a 20% deposit. So they'll only lend up to 50%. So that means you're purely dealing with investors in most cases, or cash buyers. So that completely limits your market. You pull the buyers down and takes out most of the owner-occupiers, nearly all of them, except for some of your different demographics like your Chinese who will accept living in a smaller apartment and that kind of thing.
Yep.
So basically, when you look at the banks, you've got your ASB and your BNZ, which are 40 square metres, and you've got ANZ, which is 45, your Westpac is 50, etc. So they're all different. So when you go below that 40, you're strictly dealing with the investors. So yeah, where that opens up an opportunity is long term, the banks will ease on that. And that means those apartments, while being probably 95% rented out now, will then be open to the demographic which of the lower income earners who will purchase them as places to live. And the key is I speak with most of my buyers in that period. Often I'll deal with a husband and wife, and the wife's come along. And I don't mean to put anybody in boxes. I'm just talking about from what I generally talk about. And the wife will say, "Oh, I could never live in here." And I'll be like, "Look, it's not about that. It's about you getting return and making the money." And the thing is you've got to learn that demographics who want to live in apartments are not. You're not that demographic. The demographic is generally from a different culture. And if you go back over to, say, Hong Kong, where there's about 100,000 people living in apartments about 3.6 metres squared, this is like a palace.
Nice.
So it's really thinking outside the box here. So anyway, I mean, I can talk and very easily, unfortunately, because I love what I do, easily go off topic. So, Mark, what I need you to do is pull me back onto topic as I go through, okay, to make sure you're listening.
All good. Sometimes I'll let you just go because if it's interesting, I know the listeners will want to hear it. So that's good.
So to put it back into the categories where your clients are looking at, if they're wanting purely income and the highest income, the smaller you go, the higher income you'll get, the higher return. Yeah. Okay. Now, where there's more capital gain is when you really want to be buying above that sort of 45 square metres. If it's a one bedroom, 40 is okay. If it's a two bedroom, you want to be sticking above 55.
Yeah.
Okay. What that means is you're buying it, renting it out. That'll most likely cover your mortgage, maybe a little bit more. But when you go to sell it, you're going to be selling it to the whole market, and you'll be selling it to owner occupiers. And that's where this market it's had a huge movement, and we're only halfway there. It's really going to move in that area.
Okay, just going back a step, you're saying there's opportunity there if you've got the lending to get the smaller apartment and pay 50%. So you're potentially saying, hey, if it's apartment's 38 or 39 square metres, you're only going to get 50% lending. When the lending does change, and whether it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it might be, maybe after the election, and if they did take it down to 35 square metres or 30 square metres, you'd see a price hike in those units potentially.
You've got to think about it. If you go to the outside suburbs, you look at, say, Papakura, for example, where the average sale price or average value that they're selling for is $410,000 for a house. Now, if you look at your average incomes, they haven't changed hugely, and you look at the lower demographics who they want to own their own place, but they've got to come up with a deposit and they can't afford it because of the incomes they're on. So when the bank lending changes, it enables them to borrow to 80% value or 90% value below that. A whole flood of buyers that come into that market, and these small apartments are going to be their homes.
Yeah, very true. And to validate that, we saw the opposite effect happen, didn't we, when the lending went from 90% to 80% for the first home buyers?
Yeah. So I saw it very briefly when ASB went below 40 square metres in a complex, and very quickly you got owner occupiers coming in. And, it's the kind of stock that I look at and go, geez, I wouldn't live here. But the thing is, I'm not the demographic. I'm not the person who's going to come and live here. But there's people who are happy to do so from all different cultures, and that's fine. They love it. Yeah, and so that's where the capital gain is amongst that stock. But the big question is, how long will it take for the banks to open back up again? Because when they were actually sold initially off the plans, they were all sold with 95%. So they have to move back forwards once the market's getting more and more. I suppose it's all about risk for the bank. So as soon as that risk element from apartment leaves, as with I won't go into too much detail, but as the Unit Titles Act comes in and all the long-term maintenance plans come in and buildings are looked after properly, so you don't have the leaking problems, and the risks aren't there for the banks that there has been, they can then easy lending criteria. So that's really where I see it sort of heading eventually.
I'm just going to go on there, just further on to what you said. You just mentioned new off-the-plan builds. I've got a pretty good understanding of it, but you're more of an expert in the field than I am. Can you go through the different stages, how you've seen the off-the-plan developments and builds? And I know they are different because some have been more successful than others, and the market at the time might be the difference for that. But how do you see the different stages of buying off the plan straight away, then when it's finished, and then later on, just some experiences you've seen?
Okay, personally, up until probably a couple of months ago, I would have said never buy off the plans. I don't sell off the plans. It's not something I do. It's something I may do if I see the right kind of stock that I believe in. My biggest, I suppose, gripe, if that's the right word, with off the plans is developers aren't coming in here to leave a legacy. They're coming here to make money. So they come here and go, okay, I want to put as much stock on this land to make as much money as possible, and that's all I care about. And that's what led with all the issues from the leaky buildings from a long time ago, because there weren't the checks or the regulations in place to stop that, which are now in place now. So it's an interesting one. So it's really looking at what they're selling and off the plan. So, for example, you've got some that I don't really want to name any names because it's all that kind of thing. But you've got stock that's on the market at the moment, which is clearly too small, in my opinion. That kind of off the plan stock, 92% of it selling offshore because the prices are so high and they're so far above the secondary market, so that the market that's already been built. And the reason why they're that high is because developers can't actually sell it for any less, because the cost to build is so high. I mean, the actual cost to build has gone up 15% because of Christchurch. You've got the land values gone up hugely. I mean, the Chinese are coming in on land banking and all that kind of thing. So it's not that they are putting a huge premium on it. They're struggling to make money, so it can only sell for a certain price. Yeah. So you're looking at off the plans. The only way I'd buy off the plans is if you're looking at stock that is, I suppose, attractive to your New Zealander. So that's of a decent size. That's with a view that can't be built out. That's with quality stock, not something that's, I see stuff advertised and it's got a pool in it, and the pool looks great if it was in my own house. Yeah. But when you have 286 apartments, that thing's going to turn into a washing machine.
Yeah.
Marketing looks great, but that's not the reality of the situation, and that goes back to the same kind of stuff that was built. It's just a little bit better, but not much. So yeah, off the plans, be very, very careful. Unless if it's very large owner-occupier stock, I would keep well away personally, and that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, that's good. So I'm sorry, was that bit of an impromptu question there, but yeah, no, that's great, awesome. Um, okay, just with we spoke a bit about lending, I guess, and part of the lending comes back to car parks also. A car park's important to an apartment in Auckland, and just depend on the size of the apartment whether it is important.
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question. Now, as New Zealanders, we have not been, especially older New Zealanders, we've always had the dream of a picket fence. And with a picket fence is where do I park my car? So a lot of people come in going, you have to have a car park. Now, I just sold my sister an apartment in the Lister building, 61 square metres. It has no car park because there's car park available across the road in the Wilson's car park. That gets $595 per week rent. And I sold it to her for $360,000. So, I mean, it's cash flow positive. You've got people who work in the city who don't actually need cars. So car parking is needed, an absolute must on the fringes. Yep. So if you're not right in the heart of the CBD, and I mean, say, within a kilometre of it, need a car park.
I suppose that's one of the things you look at. I mean, some people, when investors come along, there's an apartment that might be right in the middle of town, as you say, or on the outskirts, and they get offered a car park. So, and it's their choice whether they buy it or not. So it's a pretty big decision to make it. I guess another 50 or 70k for it. So I suppose that they just look at those situations, exactly where it is, what public transport is there, and is it right in the centre.
Okay, what it does is if you can buy into a building and then get a car park, or have a car parking available nearby, you don't need a car park. Okay, but where buying a car park is very useful is not actually at purchases, that's resale. It's when you resell it in the future, because that's when you're buying at the investor level and you're selling to the owner-occupier.
Right.
So when you're selling to the owner-occupier, a car park's always attractive. And a lot of people do want that. It's not absolutely needed in the CBD, in the central CBD. But having a car park here is a bonus, but also think about it. When you're purchasing and it has a car park, who you're competing with? You're competing with more owner-occupiers when it comes to price. When you're competing with more owner-occupiers, you're going to pay a lot more money. So buying without a car park can take out a lot of buyers, as long as when you sell it correctly by having a rented car park available for the person moving in or going to buy.
Yeah.
It's like anything you sell. It's the glass half full or the glass half empty. You're buying it with the glass half empty and you're selling it with the glass half full, or doing things to make it, the glass half full. So so
it's no different than you renovating a house, I guess, for a 3-bedroom house, and what you want to do is maximise the most number of buyers you can get at the end of it. And in this case here, by having the car park, it opens up all as you say, the live-in buyers or home buyers.
Well, that's the thing. The great thing, as soon as I heard you say doing up an apartment's not that expensive. Doing up a house, you're talking about $100,000, because all you're doing really is putting in carpet and a lick of paint and maybe changing some door handles to modernise it, and you can go to town on it, but without overcapitalising, it's not that much. You can have $20,000 of a reasonably, say a 60 square metre apartment, 70 square metre apartment, and make it look, just completely change it, and add so much value on the rent and then the resale value.
Absolutely. Think how much money was spent on renovation, painting the outside and re-roofing and all those good things. Surrounds and lawn, you don't have to worry too much about that. We'll get a body corp soon, but that's right.
Well, the great thing is if you're not doing anything structurally or you're not dealing with a heritage building, there's no council, which is fantastic, because we all know about the council. They try to stop you doing everything, and they charge an arm and a leg, and it takes forever. Anyway, carry on.
All good. So, hey, just on the car park thing again, just a question I thought of there was, if you own a car park, how easy it is in most apartments in Auckland, can you rent it out to other people easily, or does it depend on the body corps of the apartment you're in?
Very good question. You can have car parks get up to the value of $100,000, because what happens is if you've got car parks within a building, they are not allowed to be sold. In most complexes, not all of them, but most of them, they're not able to be sold outside the body corporate, i.e. it has to be sold to somebody who owns a unit in there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in most cases, you can't rent outside whoever's living in the building.
Okay.
And it can change the value. So if you buy a place with a car park on a separate title, that car park, and that's able to be sold outside the body corporate, which is in a few cases, that value of your car park goes up hugely. So that's where you want to look at buying an apartment and acquiring a car park through another way. You sort of see what I mean? So you buy the apartment and you acquire a car park that can be bought on a separate title close by. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. So the value of the car park really comes down to how many car parks are available in that complex. So if you look at something like Metropolis or something like Key West, which are two, pretty iconic buildings in the CBD, they don't have enough car parks. There's way more apartments than there are car parks, so the car parks are worth, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000.
Right, for getting gained yourselves.
Yeah, but if you go to an investor building like the Zest, which is the largest in New Zealand, having over 500 units, now those car parks, there's so damn many of them that they're probably only worth about 30,000.
Right. Yes.
So it all comes down to supply and demand. Every single building is its own, what I call stock. I mean, its own share, its own company, in a sense. That's how I look at it. So it's all about supply and demand. It's all really simple when you get through the numbers and have someone who can explain it to you. But it's just being aware that a one bedroom in this building has no relevance to what it's worth in another building.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, great. Just going back a step, we sort of covered on a little bit, but what's the biggest chance of gains or capital gains that you see with apartments? So what type? And I know we just spoke briefly about the smaller ones. What do you see maybe in the larger type apartments?
If I wasn't pumping all my money into a company, I'd be buying 2 bedrooms in the CBD and 2 bedrooms with a car park in the CBD on the fringes, like a storm. That market is going to go through the roof. The reason why is, and I'm not trying to sell anything on the show. I'm just telling you this is what's happening. This is what I'm selling my sister, and all that kind of thing. It's simply because, okay, the cost to build them, to replace them is $700,000-$800,000. They're selling at the moment for about $450,000. Now, to get on the property ladder now, you either go and you want reasonably central. You're either looking at $800,000 to $1.5 million for a house. So the first step for a couple is a 2 bedroom. So it's they're in one and they can put their kid in the other, or that's their first home now because they're being limited by price. And that is where you've got the mass of the buyers, and that's where this market's just going to take off. You've got the younger generation who are actually more accustomed to living apartments because a lot of them, when they went to university, of the 14,000 investor apartments in the CBD, they were living in there. They went to Auckland and all that kind of thing. So it's changing. And, for example, I mean, I'm 34. I'm not old, but I'm not young, but I never want to live in a house. Mm. And, any 34-year-old 10 years ago, they would never have said that. And there's a lot of us like that. And in the 20s, and a lot of the people going on their OEs and expats coming back are used to city life. And they're coming back to Auckland and going, hey, I want to live in a really nice apartment rather than a small 2-bedroom villa in Ponsonby that costs $1.5 million and every single one's the same.
I'd like to thank Andrew for his time and look forward to sharing the rest of this conversation next week. We love your feedback. If you have any topics or anyone you would like interviewed, please let us know. We hope you enjoyed and we hope you have an awesome week.